Civil rights movement mid-20th century. The civil rights movement of the mid-20th century in the United States was a pivotal struggle for social justice and equality, primarily focusing on ending racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans. This movement spanned roughly from the late 1940s to the late 1960s, although its roots can be traced back to earlier periods of resistance and activism. Some of the key events and milestones Civil rights movement mid-20th century. The civil rights movement of the mid-20th century in the United States was a pivotal struggle for social justice and equality, primarily focusing on ending racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans. This movement spanned roughly from the late 1940s to the late 1960s, although its roots can be traced back to earlier periods of resistance and activism. Some of the key events and milestones of the civil rights movement include Brown v. Board of Education 1954, Montgomery bus boycott 1955 to 1956, Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom 1963, Selma to Montgomery March 1965, Civil Rights Act of 1968, Fair Housing Act. Brown v. Board of Education 1954. This landmark Supreme Court case declared racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional, overturning the separate but equal doctrine established by Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896. Montgomery bus boycott 1955 to 1956. Sparked by the arrest of Rosa Parks for refusing to give up her seat on a segregated bus, the boycott lasted over a year and marked a significant victory against segregation in public transportation. Civil Rights Act of 1964. This comprehensive legislation outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Voting Rights Act of 1965. This landmark legislation aimed to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote as guaranteed under the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom 1963. This massive demonstration, highlighted by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous "I Have a Dream" speech, drew attention to the need for civil rights legislation and galvanized public support for the movement. Selma to Montgomery March 1965. Led by civil rights leaders including John Lewis and Martin Luther King Jr., this series of marches aimed to demand voting rights for African Americans and drew national attention to the brutality they faced, particularly on Bloody Sunday, when marchers were violently attacked by state troopers. Civil Rights Act of 1968, Fair Housing Act. This act prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, or sex. These are just a few highlights of the many events, actions, and individuals that contributed to the civil rights movement. The movement was characterized by non-violent protests, grassroots organizing, legal challenges, and courageous efforts of countless activists and ordinary citizens striving for equality and justice. While significant progress has been made since the mid-20th century, the struggle for civil rights and racial equality continues to this day. Thanks for watching.